over to Tara to start today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. I'm here to introduce our speakers today. We have Jonah Shine and Matt Dickens. And Jonah Shine is the National Program Manager for Homes and Buildings at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's WaterSense program. He has overseen the technical development and implementation of the WaterSense labeled home specification and certification system since their inception. He is also responsible for efforts to expand the WaterSense program's reach in the multifamily and commercial sectors through analytics, modeling, and benchmarking. Prior to joining EPA in 2008, Mr. Shine served as the Director of Outreach for the Earth Day Network, where he was responsible for several initiatives to promote water efficiency through green building strategies in the United States and the Middle East. Mr. Shine holds a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science degrees from Indiana University, as well as a Master's of Science in Environmental Science from Johns Hopkins University. We're also joined today by Matthew Dickens from the SCV Water Company. And Matthew Dickens currently serves as the Sustainability Manager at SCV Water. Matt has 25 years of experience in the fields of water and energy conservation, including work in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and California. Dickens is currently the chair for the Research and Evaluation Committees for the California Water Efficiency Partnership and the vice president for Research and Evaluation Committee for the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Dickens is the industrial leader, having presented on water and energy conservation topics globally, including in Tokyo and Kyoto, Japan, Paris, France, and Bath, the UK, as well as numerous occasions at the Water Smart Innovations Conference for the EPA's WaterSense and Energy Star programs and with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Matt has a BA in Political Science from the University of New Mexico and a Master of Public Administration from the University of Southern California's Sol Price School of Public Policy. So now I'll turn things over to Jonah to get things started. Jonah?
Thank you so much, Tara, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Let's see if I can get rid of this echo real quick. Okay, so doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do that. Just bear with me. Am I coming through as a really bad echo on the other end, Tara?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute my speakers, just so you know. I won't be able to hear you, Tara. I will be on chat if you need me, okay?
Okay. Jonah, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Jonah, you're on mute, sir.
Okay, how about that?
There you go.
Better?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. It worked fine in practice, and then as soon as we went live, not so much. Well, again, thank you for joining us. As a reminder, this is part of our Water Wednesdays webinar series. So we still have a couple left in this year's series. Everything that we've done in the past, I believe, is available in recorded format. If you see something that you'd like to go back and follow up on. And I do believe we'll have another series of webinars coming up next year, in addition with a whole new batch of new topics, as well as catching up on some of the ones we've touched on before. So one of the nice things about these webinars is we really get a good mix of people. So a lot of you probably are super familiar with Portfolio Manager, live and breathe it, and could teach me a thing or two about it. Some of you might be sort of new to Portfolio Manager. And one of the things I think is important to know about for those who maybe are who are new to Portfolio Manager is just how very prevalent it is in the marketplace. But Portfolio Manager is used by all sorts of buildings all around the country, about 25% of the commercial building stock, more than half of the Fortune 100 companies, lots of municipalities and states and different size jurisdictions use Portfolio Manager as their tool of record for reporting and benchmarking ordinances. So lots of people are using it already, and that's one of the reasons that we've really focused along in partnership with Energy Star of trying to make Portfolio Manager as good of a tool as possible for tracking and benchmarking water use in addition to energy, because we know it's already in use in a ton of places, and we think there's a tremendous opportunity and potential there. So Portfolio Manager, though it can track water use and provide feedback metrics on any building type, multifamily is the one building type that actually has a 1 to 100 score for water in multifamily buildings. It's available for existing multifamily buildings with 20 units or more. It's very consistent in general to the Energy Star score, 1 to 100. 100 is good, 1 is bad, just like in school. It's a statistical evaluation of measured whole building water use. And what we're trying to do is compare you to a meaningful peer comparison. So we are normalizing for things like weather and operational characteristics, like how big or how dense the building is. We're not normalizing for things like technology choices. So if you go ahead, if you go in and you replace all of your toilets with WaterSense labeled toilets, we expect that will save a whole lot of water. That's great. That will be reflected in the score because your score will improve, but we don't normalize it because then your score wouldn't improve. And then we want to reflect that improvement in the score. Currently, there's about 40,000 properties in Portfolio Manager that are receiving the water score as of 2020. So lots of buildings are already getting the score and really getting that useful metric of, hey, how efficient am I relative to my peers? So one of the questions we get, since multifamily is currently the only property we do a 1 to 100 water score for in multifamily, is why? And yes, we hope we can add other property types in the future. We're working on it. Both Energy Star and WaterSense are committed to that. But there are a few reasons why we chose multifamily to be our first foray into a 1 to 100 score. Number one, multifamily buildings are very intense users of water. We've got a lot of people in there. They're all going about their lives using water in all the ways that we use water in our homes, and they're in a relatively small amount of space. So there's a lot of really intense water use going on. Number two, is the presence in the national building stock. There are a lot of multifamily buildings, and they're spread all throughout the country. Lots of people rely on them to live. We think of them a lot of times as being sort of an urban phenomenon, but we know that we find them in all different parts of the country. We also had the availability of data. So that's not a given in water. It's not like energy where we have sort of this long history of data products through things like the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey or the Residential Energy Consumption Survey that the federal government has done for a lot of years. In this case, we did have good data available on how water was used in multifamily properties, thanks to the Fannie Mae Energy and Water Market Research Survey. And we'll even be able to get some updated data in the not too distant future as Fannie Mae updates that data source. So that's why we chose multifamily as our first stop. And we really feel that now more than ever, multifamily is a place that needs this type of tool. Cost of water has been going up for years now. It continues to do so. If you look at the drivers to this, it's not going anywhere fast. It's going to continue to rise even faster than everything else is these days. And for a multifamily property who's a really big consumer of water, well, most of the time, energy is going to be billed out to the residents, either via individual meters or through some sort of RUBS or allocation. But that might not be the case for water. And so all of a sudden, water becomes a really large operating expense. The other thing we've seen happen, and I think we could actually even remove the anecdotal from this statement at this point, that throughout the course of the pandemic, whenever people started spending more time at home, well, residential water use went up because they were at home more. Again, the hypothesis was that we would see that happen. Earlier in the pandemic, we had sort of anecdotal data on that. I think we've now actually seen really robust studies that tell us, yes, that is in fact what happened. And if we hope this doesn't happen again in the future, but if we do see another surge of cases in the winter and people go back to spending more time at home, yes, we're probably going to see more water use in apartment buildings and residential properties as a whole. So again, if that's one of your large operating expenses as a owner or a manager, you're going to bear the brunt of that. So it's really important you do everything you can to be as efficient as possible with your property. And then finally, we have the sort of ever-present specter of droughts. Drought has come back. It's come back with a vengeance, unfortunately. Certainly out in the West, where Matt and his team work, we know that it's really causing a lot of problems for water utilities. But it's not just a Western problem, right? So now we're starting. I used this example the other day, and I was told I probably need to have a less morbid example. But a few months ago, we started getting all these reports of as the reservoir levels dropped in Lake Powell, bodies started to be exposed, and now we're starting to get those reports in the Mississippi because the levels in the Mississippi River are really starting to drop. So drought's very prevalent in the West, and we see that, and it affects us very strongly, but it's not just a Western problem. The other thing I'll remind people is that from an infrastructure standpoint, it doesn't matter if you're in an area of abundant water. If the water level in a well field or in a river drops below your intake level, all of a sudden you can't access the water with your existing infrastructure. So you've got a problem right away, even if you can look around and see sources of water every place. So again, truly not just a Western problem. So you're probably asking yourself, well, how do I get the score? And in order to get the score, there's a handful of pieces of information that we need. We do need 12 months of water use. Like I said, this is an actual consumption-based benchmark, so it's not modeled consumption, it's actual observed consumption. We do need to know the building location because we need to be able to pull climate data to generate the score. We need some basic information about building size, so floor area, number of units, total number of bedrooms, usually things that from an operating perspective, people usually know about their buildings. And then we also need irrigated area. Irrigated area is one I always like to point out. Portfolio manager will default this to 0. Functionally, that is a little bit of a penalty. Right? You actually get an artificially low score. The reason being that a portfolio manager will adjust for the idea that you have irrigable area, that you have a landscape that might require supplemental water. And so if you let it default to 0, portfolio manager is essentially comparing you against peers that also have no irrigation. If you are actually using water for irrigation, you're going to look relatively poorly when compared to those properties. So there's a handful of relatively simple ways to update your irrigated area. I always also like to caution people, don't let perfect be the enemy of very good here. It's better to update the value even with a rough estimate than it is to let portfolio manager default it to 0 and potentially get that penalty. So what's the use of the score? What does it do for us? And this is just a histogram of water use across multifamily buildings in a example territory, an example jurisdiction. And this is usually what we'll see, right? Water use is sort of all over the place. We've got a whole bunch of buildings that are using not so much water. We've got a handful of buildings that are really using a lot of it. Does that mean that the properties that are using a small amount of water are efficient? Not necessarily. Does it mean that the properties that are using a really large amount of water are inefficient? Again, not necessarily, because there could be other factors involved that are influencing water use and really provide good reasons for why the property is using the water the way that it does. So that's the beauty of the water score. It takes all of this really complicated information that can impact how properties use water, and it translates it into this one really to understand number. Like I said, 1 is bad, 100 is good. If you're somewhere in between, then you probably have room to move in either direction. Again, just really digging into what the water score can do for us is it lets us look across all those various factors. So in this instance, if we were to look just at the number of units in water use, which is a very common normalizing factor that people use in absence of a tool like the water score, so there's gallons per unit, we see that, yeah, there's a relationship, right? You put more units into a building, that means you have more homes, more households in the building, and so we expect it to use more water. But as you can see, it's not perfect. Right? This is not a perfect normalization. There's other things going on that are influencing certain properties to exhibit really high per unit water use or really low per unit water use. Again, if you just went and you say, okay, well, we're going to target the properties that exhibit really high per unit water use, well, that's better than just looking at total water use, but we can probably do a little bit better using the score. We could also plot this against something like age of the building. Right? The hypothesis here is that older buildings have older plumbing products, plumbing products, and older equipment use more water. And so, if you have an older building with high water use, then you maybe have a good target to go in and do a plumbing retrofit. But again, we know that's not 100% accurate. So can we do maybe just a little bit better when it comes to targeting? And again, that's the beauty of the score. We can look not just across one or two factors, but across a multitude of factors. We can normalize for the number of units, the square footage, the density, the irrigated area, and then we can look at that across the age of the building. So rather than just saying, well, this property uses a lot of water and it's old, so I'm going to target it for potential plumbing product retrofits, we can say, okay, well, this property uses a lot of water. It's performing poorly relative to its peers, and it's an old property. So now I'm thinking, well, now I'm looking across multiple factors. Maybe we really have something here, and I can be a lot more confident looking relatively blindly at that property that we know what we can do to help fix it. We could do the same thing with irrigated area, right? Outdoor water use, depending on the climate, could be a really large portion of total water use in a multifamily property. If we can look at properties that are scoring poorly relative to their peers, are using a lot of water, and have large irrigated areas, I have a pretty good sense of where we need to look. And I think that's all really representative of what Matt and his team at SCV Water were able to do. And I'm going to let Matt take a minute to tell you a little bit about that.
Thank you, Jonah, and thank you again to all the attendees on today's call. Thank you for joining us and spending time with us on this fascinating topic. Again, I'm Matt Dickens, SCV Water Sustainability Manager. A little bit about SCV Water, who we are. We're a full-service regional water agency located in the Santa Clarita Valley. We are both an importer, what is called a state water project contractor, as well as a retail service provider in northern Los Angeles County. If you've ever been to Magic Mountain, that's where we are located. That's one of our landmarks here. Our service area comprised about 195 square miles. We got about 74,000 retail customers and a population about 280,000 folks, and we typically deliver about 60 to 70,000 acre feet of water per year. Okay. So in my presentation today, I'm going to look at the multifamily project overview, which is something that we at SCV Water decided to implement following the release of the Water Score tool, following a presentation I heard from Jonah at the IWA conference, I think in 2017, Once our agency formed and launched as a single entity, we started looking at this specific property and customer class to identify optimal priorities and to see if we could measure and monitor our apartment portfolio within our service area and if we had opportunities for conservation, all with the hope of being more effective and efficient in our program expression. So in this sense, we're going to look at the analysis, the engagement, various efficiency measures or treatment, evaluation and performance of those measures, as well as the adaptation of efforts and how we have modified the program moving forward and what kind of opportunities we have left in order to accomplish what we would call sustainability transformation. So, all right, step one, turning to analysis. SCV Water has quite a few of pretty innovative tools that we use to identify efficiency or efficient levels of use. Those include water efficiency targets and water budgets for residential and dedicated irrigation metered customers. We used to have tiered rates, but we currently do not. We have a single quantity rate, but we still communicate out customers' usage relative to those efficiency benchmarks, which is shown kind of here with this dial. We can see the usage in this chart here, the red usage being the red line in the chart. Let me get my annotation here. The red line in the chart kind of showing what the water efficiency target is, and the blue showing the actual consumption of this residential customer until they made changes and started getting their usage in line with the weather normalized, landscape normalized water budgets for that property. We also have tools like this down here that kind of shows, this is a parcel map that we were able to plot water usage three-dimensionally in this chart so we could identify some outliers. And by looking at that, we could do a couple of things. One, identify opportunities for conservation success in the residential sector, but then also to do that kind of residential normative comparison, so you could compare your usage to a neighbor's. First, we deal with these kind of leak issues, these large uses, and then we can kind of look at how your usage compares to your neighbors or look for those outliers in a specific neighborhood so we can do kind of focused, targeted outreach. But with that, we have education engagement and, of course, these indoor and irrigation water use efficiency programs. But what we've noticed over time is while we have some great data on residential customers, and we can kind of look at various different types of normative analysis comparisons, as well as dedicated irrigation metered customers, throughout droughts and throughout kind of typical changes in water usage, I think many of us in California and maybe in other places experience significant reductions in gallon per capita a day over time for the various types of customers, particularly residential. But what happens with the multifamily apartment complex or multifamily customers is they kind of stayed stagnant, kind of operating in a bubble that's outside of what we're seeing kind of happening in other segments of the population. So, what that means is that in times of increased conservation across the board with background noise, and whether it be from recession or drought, apartment complexes use the same water. When other customers are rebounding and using more water after a drought or recession, apartment complexes are using the same amount of water. So we recognize that we have this kind of flatline group of a classification of customers who we think has some significant conservation opportunities, but we're just not seeing much change in their usage patterns from year to year. So we want to dive further into that analysis for that group. So after learning about the Energy Star Portfolio Manager water score tool for multifamily apartments, what we did is we started collecting that data for about 90% of all of the apartment complexes in our utility, in our service area. So we're the water utility and we have that data. We have water usage data. We have account data. So we have quite a bit of information that we need in order to compile this analysis and develop this analysis. But there's certain things we had to go and collect beyond that, such as landscape area measurements, number of type of products at each apartment complex. And we collected that information and put it into this tool again for about 90% of our apartment complex customers. And this kind of shows, initially that we had, thousands and tens of thousands of data points that we were putting into this tool to conduct the analysis. So what our first assessment showed us once we started getting the data in and kind of looking at how our apartment complexes varied in their water usage and particularly their water scores, what we found is kind of similar to what Jonah shared early on, except kind of inverted. What we see is that most of our customers here, we have the number of apartment complexes, and then on the horizontal axis, we have their water score, with one being kind of the lowest, and you're shooting for a 75 and above. And we kind of see the distribution of where our apartment complexes fell within this analysis. And as you can see, 90% of them were falling below the target of 75. We only had about 5 or 6 apartment complexes that were scoring the efficient level of a 75 percentile or above. Most of them were scoring pretty low, with the significant a plurality here of a score of 1 to 10. That means if you have a 1, you really are kind of nowhere lower to go, I guess. So that gave us some information in terms of, okay, well, we know that you have low scores. We know who has low scores. Now let's kind of just look at some other data to see if we can kind of flesh out some more direction from this analysis. This is a scatter plot that shows that, on this time we have the water score on this axis, and on the horizontal axis, we have the year built. Again, we're showing something similar to what Jonah was sharing, that there is a correlation. It's not a 1, but there is some correlation, meaning that as the plumbing code, particularly in 1994 and after, with the US EPA Act, yeah, there was some efficiencies that were gained in apartment complexes usage and in their score, really. But it's not necessarily meaning that they're going to be efficient in the score. So there's opportunities there. We can dive further into their water usage to kind of flesh out and tease out why that might exist. But anyway, we saw clustering, and that meant that most of the apartment complexes with really low scores were before that 1994 level. But still, does this mean that we should target all of these customers? Maybe we start with the oldest and the lowest score, and that might be a good way to approach program implementation. However, we think that if you add some more data, maybe a third point perspective, perhaps there's something else to learn. And we did. So in this case, we have the same chart I just showed before, except now we've added to the chart a third point perspective of the volume of water use per site of that scatter plot. We can still see that there is a correlation, that there seems to be a relationship that as the construction is relatively newer, there's going to be some improvements in their water score. Of course, it doesn't mean it's a 75. There's some improvements, but it's kind of modest at best. But then also, when we added the volume, we can kind of see there's these clustering right around 1980 of sites that have really low water scores, but are using huge volumes of water. And that tells us, you know what, we should prioritize these customers for some sort of programmatic activity, because even though there's some that have lower scores than that, their volume of water usage, the savings opportunity is less. So if we're going to maximize our engagement opportunities, improve the cost of the benefit and effectiveness of our programs, then what we want to do is we want to target these really big users with very low water scores. That's the hypothesis. So now let's look at engagement, what engagement looked like. So, when you have this data as a utility service provider or a public administrator, you kind of, you start drooling over all this data, and you start thinking to yourself, wow, if we can just share this and connect customers to those end use customers and property managers to what this means, we're going to get participation in all of our programs. The challenge is that there's credibility issues, there's engagement issues, and there's also buy-in issues. There are customers, our multifamily apartment customers, really worried about this. Well, that requires some finesse. What we did is we contracted with an engagement consultant to say, look, let's talk to all of the corporate managers in our service area, rather than kind of approaching them with, you're the worst performer, or you guys are the lowest performers in the valley. Look at your water score, how terrible it is. We didn't think that'd be very motivating. Rather, we thought we'd reach out to all the property managers and corporate managers and say, look, what are your sustainability goals, and how can SCV Water support those? And we found that quite a bit of customers were looking for support and asked for the types of things that we already offered. But by creating that desire and that awareness, instead of telling them what they need to do, asking what they want to do, we had a lot of folks who were saying, you know what, we're really interested in doing this. So we met with those property owners, management staff, and then we started doing surveys to essentially ask them, what kind of programs and support are you looking for? Once we had that research completed, we created an outreach and engagement group to kind of bring in those apartment complex managers and corporate managers that were in charge of those really low performers, and kind of met with them and asked them where would they like to start. So we had kickoff meetings. We showed them some initial water savings estimates. For the 8 sites that we're going to review today, we had about 61 million gallons annually of water that we could save by implementing these programs. So yeah. So now we turn to efficiency measures, and I guess the last thing I'd say on the previous slide is that while once we had the attention of the property managers, of course, we tried to steer them towards the priorities that we thought were, going to be much more beneficial to them. They had different priorities, but we were able to finesse. That's where the data became really helpful. We could identify the target market. We could bring them in for discussion. We worked with them without exposing this score or having some sort of value judgment around the score, and we encouraged them to prioritize those areas that had the biggest savings and the biggest savings opportunities. So once we did that, we conducted for phase 1 and 2 these various different measures. We did about 2,700 checkups. We installed 3,300 shower heads, 1,300 high efficiency kitchen aerators, about 3,500 bathroom aerators, 5,000 UHET or PHET toilets, and rebated those. We didn't install them, we rebated those with the vendor of the property manager's choice. We did repair about 200 toilet leaks, and we conducted irrigation inspections for over 729 zones. So this kind of work, we have a third-party consultant that we contract out with, and they go out and provide the services. We basically coordinate as the utility. We coordinate the engagement, we coordinate the service, the checkups, and we also purchase all of the products. And then we help the managers and all of the different entities kind of coordinate and organize the checkups. So quite a bit of work done. All right, let's look towards the evaluation. So we've done the pre-analysis. We identified those big saving opportunities that kind of gave us a roadmap to navigate this sector. We met with them and got buy-in, and now we've done treatment at each of these sites. How did that performance, or what was the results and outcomes of those efforts? Well, we kind of saw very similar things that I guess supported our hypothesis that we had significant conservation opportunity here. For this site, I'm going to look at what we're going to look at here is kind of their pre-usage, and then we're going to look at when the checkups were done. And when the checkups were done, that would include the checkup, the installation of the shower heads, aerators, bathroom aerators, as well as the repair of the toilet leaks. So we did that in staggering different timelines so that we kind of look at the savings values of each of the different efforts. So the shower heads and the aerators savings is what we're going to see in blue here. The green bar is their previous usage or their current usage. The blue section of the stack bar is what we associated with the savings from the aerators and the shower heads. And then the yellow or orange here is from the toilets. So as you can see, we got pretty significant savings, about 40% that remained in plants once we installed the toilets or we paid for the toilet retrofits as well as the install of the shower heads and the aerators. So this is the first site. For the second site, kind of same story here. Before, their usage was running around 2 million gallons per month, and now it's running around 1 million gallons per month after we installed all the shower heads and aerators and paid for the toilet retrofits. Pretty significant savings there. Same story here. We did the checkups in March of 2019. Their usage was about 2 million gallons, maybe 2.5 million gallons. We did the installation of the shower heads and aerators in March, and then the toilets were installed in May. And we can see their usage over time remains low, and their savings is pretty significant, about half. This is all indoor usage, by the way. It doesn't show the outdoor usage. A little bit less with Site D, but again, same story. Once we did the install of the toilets, or paid for the rebate for the toilets, as well as doing the shower heads and aerators, savings over time. The same story over and over again. So our hypothesis seems to start to pan out in line with what our thinking was, and at least the results are kind of in line with what our hypothesis was. And so here's another site where we have Site G, where we only did the only a few toilets were installed because they had pretty much high efficiency toilets in plant anyway. So Rosemary, maybe you could help me run the video here. I'm going to show you a video in real time. This is taking this data for one of the sites. We're going to run it in Gapminder, which is a free tool that you can use to visualize data. Again, that's Gapminder if any of you are looking for a way to kind of play your data in a video format. So what are we looking at here? Just real quick. Each one of these dots is an individual site meter for an apartment, for each apartment, about 4 units on each meter. And the range of usage we can see ranges from about 10 to 100 CCF per month. We see some outliers occurring. We also can kind of see where the average usage is. Now we're in pandemic time where we're seeing more usage indoors. But watch what happens here. Audits and the toilet checks and the toilet installs were completed. And as you can see, we can run that one more time, Rosemary. So here's their usage before we did anything. This is their monthly usage for all these 80 plus meters at this apartment complex, that's about, again, four units per meter. Pretty significant range and variability of water usage. Those are toilet leaks that are occurring. Toilets have been installed now. So that's pretty compelling demonstration there. Thank you, Rosemary. Pretty compelling demonstration of what the toilet installation as well as the checkups did and how they impacted water consumption. This chart just kind of shows the same thing here. Rosemary, are we on slide 36? Just want to confirm that. I think I switched.
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. So this is just a graphic showing the same information I just shared. And as you can see, your average, kind of the most of the meters here are somewhere in the 40 CCF per month, but we do have a range of about 20 to 100 CCF when we start, although the range does grow from about 20 to as high as 300 CCF. And again, one CCF is 748 gallons. This is kind of all your toilet leaks that we're seeing there and inefficient uses of indoor water. We can also see the change in consumption when we had pandemic rules where people were staying at home and they transitioned to more indoor use. And then afterwards, we can see what happens when we installed the shower heads, aerators, and the toilets. We see a big change in both the average and the range, where we cleared out all of this excessive wasteful uses of water there, most likely resulting from leaks. Okay, so moving on to performance. On this chart, we're going to look at kind of all the numbers that we have collected so far. We have our phases 1, 2, and 3, 4 apartment complexes, sites in phase 1, 3 in phase 2, and 1 in phase 3. When the survey occurred, when the toilet installs occurred, and then how many units each of these sites kind of comprise and what type of work we did, as well as leaving these kind of these leave behind cards, which is just kind of a cool thing that we did. We essentially, SCV Water, kind of in English and Spanish, we provided direction to customers on how to use their new products, as well as behavioral tips on ways to be water efficient as an apartment tenant. So those are things we left behind that not only promoted the agency, but they also promoted WaterSense in the sense that all the products that we installed were WaterSense certified. So looking here at the estimated total gallons saved, what this is about 214 million gallons of water we've actually verified have been saved compared to pre-use now that we've installed all of these aerators and toilets. That's 214 million gallons total since February of 2019. However, we also look at an annual. What is the change of our annual demands? And we're looking at these 8 sites having an annual demand reduction of about 75 million gallons. So you look at kind of the savings year after year, but also the impact on annual demand. And again, I just want to point out that we actually outperformed our estimates when we looked at our engineered estimates based off of what we knew about the sites and what we predicted based off of the pre and post device standards. We projected about 61 million gallons savings per year. We overshot that by about 13.5 million gallons. So we're outperforming our kind of conservative engineering estimates, which is really great. I don't know if that would be the case across all apartment complexes, but certainly by prioritizing and targeting these customers using the WaterScore tool, we identified the greatest opportunity for success. And that was our goal, again, to use a compass to navigate this market, which we hadn't really engaged with. All right, so finally, adaption here. The final frontier of this program, I think, is that while we've seen the water score improve for all those sites that we conducted the surveys and retrofits and toilet rebates, the big issue we see remaining is in irrigation improvements. We have quite a bit of findings from all of our different landscape irrigation audits that we did at the sites, but those don't seem to communicate or be as easily manageable as the retrofits that we provide. So we kind of leave a report and we say, hey, here's all the things you could be doing at your various different sites that you should consider, problems that we found in the irrigation audits. But a lot of the outcomes and recommendations from those reports typically get shelved because apartment complexes just don't have the resources to manage those. So I guess the adaption is our next opportunity is really to focus on turf conversion as well as landscape efficiency and operational improvements and training. Here we can see, some of our different rebates. SCV Water, like many agencies, has a lot of lucrative incentives for customers, including irrigation rebates or rebates for irrigation efficiency improvements, including high efficiency nozzles, pressure regulating bodies with check valves, drip irrigation conversion for non-turf application, as well as $3 per square foot for converting turf to drought tolerant. In our lawn replacement program, we also have additional incentives for things like using native plants, a 50-cent bonus per square foot if you use native plants, 50-cent bonus for using rain gardens, rebates for rain barrels. We also rebate bee hotels and owl boxes in case customers want to provide some additional sustainability features to their gardens. So lastly, I would kind of want to share a couple of these points. In terms of the qualitative analysis, once we did the checkups, we did the pre-analysis, we did the engagement, we did the checkups, we did the performance evaluation, we also wanted to look at the qualitative analysis. And specific to that, we wanted to see how well was our consultant installing the devices, what kind of work orders were the site staff having to respond to, as well as what were the customers and the properties saying in terms of the number of complaints about the products and or any other type of qualitative information we could collect from those sites. And what we found is that early on, there were some problems in the bathroom aerator installations, but our consultant worked to fix those issues. And so the number of work orders greatly dropped once they did some staff training to install those aerators more effectively. However, from customer acceptance, the apartment complexes have noted, all of them, that they've received no complaints, but rather they've actually received customers who have communicated satisfaction and appreciation for having new shower heads and toilets that flush and those types of things. So we actually had really good qualitative response from customers. So that was really important, particularly when we did a lot of these things during COVID. So the folks during COVID were concerned about pandemic. There's health scares, there's political scares, there's economic scares, all these type of information that makes it kind of challenges our sense of security. But in many ways, customers found security in the water agency providing continuity of service, but also in supporting these qualitative benefits to customers. So really great program. Lastly, I would say in terms of our next steps, we are continuing to monitor and evaluate. We have dozens more sites that we're expanding our programs to. We have increased our toilet rebates, our HET rebates from $200 to $250 per unit, and we're working diligently with the multifamily apartment complexes to convert that turf area, which requires about 8 to 10 feet of water per square foot per year. Trying to get them to convert much of that non-functional turf area to a drought-tolerant landscape. So excited about that, but we do have a fairly large project on the horizon of 75,000 square feet. But for some apartment complexes, the culture of turf remains it prevails today, even in drought. So we've got some work to do there. But yeah, again, continued monitoring and evaluation of the program, which again continues to outperform our expectations, expansion of services, increasing incentives, as well as the number of customers that we engage with. And then we have sustained conservation. Our goal, and my goal as a program administrator, is to accomplish sustainable demands, create transformation in the community, and to be effective and efficient as a program administrator and in program expression. So that's our goal, is to have continued and sustained conservation, which this program has really helped us accomplish quite a bit towards those objectives. With that, I'll pass it back to Jonah. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for sharing. I always say, maybe in a perfect world where resources aren't limited, we just go out and we try to replace absolutely every inefficient toilet and every inefficient plumbing fixture. But most of us don't live in that world. So I think it's a really great example of using the data available and using the water score tool to really put your team in a position where you can be as successful as possible and save as much water as possible with the limited resources that you have. So I always really appreciate that and hope it's useful to other people as well. Now, one thing that is unique about SCV's program, SCV's project, is I think Matt and his team really came to things with a lot of experience doing retrofits and a lot of experience in efficiency. So when they found poorly performing buildings, they sort of instinctively knew, and from experience, knew what to do knew about them. We understand that's not the case for everybody. So, for those of you who maybe don't have as much of a background or just need a little bit of help knowing where to look, when you get your water score and you found out, oh no, I got a 25, and I'd really like to do a lot better than that, we do have some resources available to help you. We have guides that help you focus on individual end uses, so bathrooms, residential kitchens and laundries, outdoor space, and mechanical systems, cooling towers, and things like that. Again, once you establish that maybe you're not getting the score, you're not performing the way that you would like to relative to other buildings, these are the resources that can help you understand, well, why might that be, and what can I do about it? The other thing I always like to flag for people is that we are open to hearing what you'd like to see. If there are other tools that would really help you, know where to look or address poor performing buildings, whether or not that is on the technical side or it's more on the marketing side. If you'd like to see similar tools for more categories, more buildings, as I said, that's something that we're working on right now. Just as I said before, we, at EPA, we also do not live in the perfect world where we have infinite resources, but we're very much committed to using the resources we have to make the maximum impact. We need your help to do that, so we want to support you as best we can. Let us know what you'd like to see. As a reminder, this is what we have coming up on future Water Wednesdays. And again, everything that we've done in the past, if it's a topic you weren't able to join for, but you'd like to learn about, is available on the training website. You'll be able to see the recording. And you can always get in touch with us if you want more information. Speaking of which, this is where you can reach us. Again, we're happy to field any questions. We're happy to contact me directly or the WaterSense helpline, which is a very resource we offer, is very quick and effective at responding to inquiries. And with that, I think we have saved about 10 minutes or so. And Tara, I want to see if we have any questions.
Yes, we have a couple of questions, Jonah, and please keep them coming so that we can get to as many as we can. So one of the questions is, so in Portfolio Manager, do you not get points if you have landscaped areas that are xeriscaped, or is the idea that you list all landscaping as irrigated, even if it's not, and then lower water use leads to a higher score?
Yeah, and I think the questioner's got this exactly. Technically, we should really say irrigable, not irrigated. Interestingly enough, when we say irrigable, people contact us and tell us we're misspelling irrigation. But the guidance is, and the way we want you to interpret that is, if it's a growing plant, if it can receive water, we want you to include it as the irrigated area. If you've done a good job of it, and you follow through with the maintenance that you should with a xeriscaped area, just as the person suggested, that will reflect in lower water usage, and so that will be reflected in the score. So you do, in essence, get credit for it, as long as you actually reduce your water use with it.
Okay, yeah, so it's about the reductions, not necessarily about what it is in the first place.
Exactly. That's the beauty of the score. If you can reduce water use with it, it's going to be reflected in the score.
Okay, the next question is for Matt. Matt, could you touch on how much was budgeted for these programs and for your other water conservation programs? And did you offer these rebates and upgrades to other multifamily buildings that were not specifically the ones you were targeting? And if not, did those buildings provide pushback or complaints about not being included?
Great questions, and I hope I understand, Julie, the question here. So we have a conservation budget that is funded through our rates, and that incorporates and includes programs for education, engagement, general information, as well as other types of programs like residential programs with a whole suite of measures, as well as commercial programs with a large suite of measures, and large landscape programs with a large suite of measures. We have about 3 million budgeted that we can spend annually on our conservation programs. And we've used a water use efficiency strategic plan, which identifies all the different measures and the type of numbers and performance measures we're trying to accomplish in order to meet our internal conservation goals, as well as those mandated by the state. So what I tend to do is I look at our programs. If we have low participation in some areas, what I will do is I will go to the next suite of measures and look for conservation programs that have equal or increased cost effective or cost benefit ratios. And so in this case, the apartment complexes, we had funding available in residential audits, which were kind of low participating at the time. And we started to look for where we could get savings in the community that were cost effective. And so that's where we funded this program from. In terms of the targeting, we offer the services to all of our customers. And so, when you look at targeted marketing, we tend not to say this is only reserved for those that we want to reserve it for. It's available for those who want it. So we can get apartment complexes in the program who are like, hey, I want you to come to perform the service for me. Maybe they have a water score of 60 or 50 and they're not in our priority list. We'll go out and still provide the service. They may be qualified for the toilet rebates or not, depending on what their current status is. But we'll do the checkups. That's not an issue, and we'll provide those shower heads. However, we do still use the information to conduct targeted outreach. And that is how we kind of increase our savings. So again, it's offered to everybody, but we do use targeted outreach to specifically engage with those we think we can have the most optimal conservation outcomes with.
Excellent. So you said 3 million, not 30 million?
3 million, yeah.
33 million. Okay.
So we have a $3 million annual budget that we use for all the different suites of measures.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question, I believe, is for Jonah. Why must a multifamily property have at least 20 units to be able to receive a score?
That's a great question. And actually, it has to do with the source data. The survey that we used to develop the score just didn't have very many smaller properties in it. And there is some evidence in the data that the size of the property as a whole, so even if you normalize for the size and for the number of units, the pattern really starts to change when you get to smaller properties. So because we didn't have a lot of properties, and this is consistent, by the way, on the Energy Star score for energy, in addition to the water score, we weren't confident that because we didn't have a lot of data in the source survey, we weren't confident that the model would be able to say something very meaningful and accurate about smaller properties. That's something that we'll definitely reevaluate going forward. As I think I mentioned briefly, we hope that we'll be able to update the score based on more recent data in the not too distant future. And certainly the need for information on smaller buildings, smaller being a lower number of units, is one of the things that we've flagged. The other thing which we're not entirely sure on is, I mentioned there does seem to be a little bit of a different data signature as you move into buildings with fewer number of units. The big question we have that we can't quite answer, is that a reflection of the fact that smaller buildings have different management techniques employed on them? Or is it that there's something actually operationally different about them and the way they need to use water? That's not entirely clear. Again, the score is a model. It's not going to be perfect. That's not the goal. The goal is, can we make sure that we have something that is statistically robust and defensible and makes a meaningful statement, a meaningful peer comparison about the property. So that's why we limit it to 20 units and above. If we can take that limitation away and feel comfortable and that we're meeting all those goals while doing so, we will 100% do it.
Excellent. Another somewhat related question is, what is the universe that the 1 to 100 score is based on?
Got it. So I think there's a couple ways that question could be interpreted, and certainly if there's more clarity on it, then I'm happy to provide more details. But it is the 1 to 100. It's based on a ratio, and that so it is 1 to 100. You cannot be less than 1. You cannot be more than 100. So that's different than if you're familiar with like a HERS rating or even a HERS H2O rating, which operates on a 0 to 100 scale, but you could be above 100 or below 0 if you were worse than the reference, or you actually generated energy and returned it to the grid. 1 to 100, it's a scale, sort of like grading on a curve. And the way that we decide where you fit on that curve is by comparing your actual water use, so your actual water use intensity, gallons per square foot, against what the model thinks an average performing building would do given the same operating characteristics. So same size, same number of units, same density, same climate. Like I said, hopefully, I'm happy to answer more specifically if I haven't hit the intent of that question.
Yeah, thank you. The next one, someone's asking for more information on cooling towers. I would encourage you to come and participate in our webinar next month, which will be a deep dive on cooling towers. You can also check out our website. We have a best management practice for cooling towers specifically. So you can check that out at the multifamily resource guides that Jonah had put on the slides that you'll receive in the next couple of days. Another question is, in a multi-residential building, what's the percentage of water usage that's associated with plumbing fixtures?
So that's a tricky question. The reason being because it is highly variable. One of those variabilities will be around the efficiency of the plumbing fixtures. So obviously, if you have very efficient plumbing fixtures, then the percentage goes down. The other reason it's highly variable is because of climate and outdoor water use. So if you're in a cool climate with little to no irrigation or irrigable area, then the percentage is going to be quite high, particularly if you have older inefficient products. If you're in a warm climate that has where you have a large landscape and because it's warm and it's warm year round, you're irrigating year round, then it's going to be quite a bit lower. I will say, across the board, plumbing products tend to represent a large portion of water use in multifamily properties, in all residential properties. So they're a lot every place. Whether or not they're 20% or they're 50%, highly variable depending on the circumstance. But they're a big contributor to water use in multifamily properties, no matter where you go. Matt, I don't know if you have particular experience, having worked in a mostly arid regions, but a variety of climates.
Yeah, Jonah, thanks. And that's a good question. I just want to note that on the slides I shared, all of those meters were indoor. So you're looking at that being 100% indoor. I didn't share the outdoor meters because we do track those with dedicated irrigation metered. But it can range from being half, 60% to being 20%. And it just varies from both when the site was built, what the site's landscapes look like, and then how well they're operated in terms of their irrigation management. So we did have a couple sites where we saw 40% savings indoors, as I shared with the previous slide, but their water score went up from a 1 to a 3. And that kind of told us right away that, unless we approach getting that water use to be super efficient or very efficient, or change the calculus by transforming the landscape from turf to drought tolerant plants, then their water score is going to remain low, even though we're getting 40% savings inside. So it really does vary. But using the water score tool, it really helps you kind of identify where's your saving opportunities going to come from, and what percentage of that water score, or how is that water score weighted to reflect indoor and outdoor usage. So some great opportunities. I would call the landscape use in the apartment complexes the final frontier for that group. Would definitely be interested in talking to more folks about how to effectively engage and to get transformation in irrigation use.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt and Jonah. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to wrap things up, and I encourage you to ask more questions by the contact information if you have them that come up afterwards, or you can look through some of the resources that we have in the slides when you get them. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.